A car dealership's routine is shattered when an unannounced visitor walks in. The manager's snap judgment leads to a shocking turn, one that forces her to face the truth when the police arrive. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over South Point Motors, making the sleek rows of cars gleam like polished jewels. It was business as usual. Customers meandered, peered inside vehicles, and engaged in lively chats with salespeople. The rhythmic energy of the dealership hummed in the air. At the far edge of the lot, a tall black man emerged from a modest sedan. His appearance was refined, yet understated. A crisp white shirt, dark slacks, and polished leather shoes. His eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the dealership's modern facade. This was no ordinary customer. His name was Terran, and today he wasn't here to buy, he was here to observe. As the true owner of South Point Motors, Terran had opted for an unannounced visit, craving an unfiltered glimpse into how things truly operated. Adjusting his watch, he strolled toward the showroom, his pace unhurried, his demeanor composed. Inside, the crisp scent of leather and freshly cleaned floors mingled with the buzz of commerce. Digital screens flashed top models, while salespeople flitted between desks, juggling calls and walk-ins. Yet, as Terran stepped in, an almost imperceptible shift rippled through the air. Eyes flickered toward him, curious, wary, but no one approached. Then, slicing through the low murmur of the showroom, came a voice, sharp, clipped, and anything but welcoming. "Can I help you?" The words, laced with authority and a tinge of doubt, belonged to Margaret, the dealership's manager. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer, her heels clicking against the tiled floor, she radiated confidence, the kind that could command a room or make a dangerous assumption. Margaret prided herself on efficiency and results, never one to sugarcoat her words. As she sized up the man before her, her expression remained unreadable, but her gaze lingered a beat too long, measuring, assessing, judging. Terran met her scrutiny with an easy, polite smile. "Just browsing, thank you." Margaret's lips barely moved as she echoed, "Browsing." Her tone was flat, edged with skepticism. "Well, if you're looking for financing options, our team can assist you, but unless you're serious about buying today, we prefer to focus on active customers." The words landed with a quiet chill, cold, clipped, and dismissive. Terran's expression didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. A moment of recognition, perhaps. Still, he remained composed. "I appreciate the information. I'd like to look around a bit more, if that's okay." Margaret's mouth tightened. "Just don't touch anything without asking first," she instructed curtly, before pivoting on her heel and striding away. As Terran moved through the showroom, examining vehicles and making quiet notes on his phone, the tension in the air thickened. Employees whispered in hushed tones, their glances darting toward him when they thought he wasn't looking. It wasn't long before Margaret returned, her heels striking the floor with sharp precision. This time, her arms were crossed, and the irritation in her eyes was barely concealed. "I noticed you've been wandering around for—" Margaret folded her arms, her voice laced with suspicion. "You've been wandering around for a while," she said sharply. "If you're not planning to buy, I'll have to ask you to leave. We don't have time for distractions." Terran looked up from the SUV specs he'd been reviewing, his expression calm, but his voice carrying quiet authority. "I'm not distracting anyone. I have every right to be here." Margaret scoffed. "Look, I've seen this before. People coming in, wasting time, pretending they're interested. We're running a business here. If you're not buying, you need to go." Terran's gaze remained steady. "I think you're making some assumptions about me," he said evenly. Her irritation sharpened into hostility. "And I think I know my job," she snapped. "Either show me you're serious, or I'll handle this my way." The tension in the room thickened. Employees cast uneasy glances, watching in silence, uncertain whether to intervene. The air crackled with the weight of an impending confrontation. But Terran remained composed. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he met Margaret's piercing gaze with an unshakable calm that only deepened her frustration. A beat of silence passed before he spoke. "Handle it your way?" he asked, his voice firm, but controlled. "What exactly does that mean?" Margaret straightened her blazer, exhaling sharply. "It means I have to ensure my team and customers feel comfortable. And right now, you're making people uncomfortable by wandering around without a clear purpose." Terran raised an eyebrow. "Uncomfortable? Because I'm looking at cars in a car dealership." The subtle challenge in his tone made her bristle. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a sharp whisper. "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but we've had enough people come in here wasting time, asking for test drives, then vanishing when it's time to talk numbers. So unless you're ready to buy, I suggest you leave." Terran held her gaze, unreadable. Then he smiled, a small, knowing smile that only seemed to irritate Margaret further. "I don't recall asking for a test drive," he said smoothly. "I'm just observing. Is that against your policy?" A flush of color touched her face, but she didn't back down. "You're disrupting my staff, and I won't allow that." Across the showroom, a young salesman hesitated, clearly overhearing the exchange. He looked as if he wanted to step in, but thought better of it. Margaret caught his hesitation and shot him a glare, silently daring him to intervene. Terran remained unshaken. "I'd be happy to speak to someone higher up if you think I'm an issue." Margaret let out a dry laugh. "Higher up? I am the manager. There's no one else you need to speak to." Terran slid his hands into his pockets, taking a step back. "Good to know," he said simply. Her frustration boiled over. Without another word, she stormed to the nearest desk, snatched up the phone, and began dialing. "If you won't leave on your own, I'll have someone escort you out," she said, coolly. Terran watched her, his expression unreadable. "You're calling the police over someone looking at cars?" Margaret didn't respond, too focused on the dispatcher. "Yes, there's a man here who's being uncooperative," she said, her tone sharp with authority. "He's refusing to leave the premises, despite multiple requests." A ripple of unease spread through the showroom. Employees exchanged nervous glances, their movements slowing as the weight of the situation settled in. Near the reception desk, a whispered conversation broke out. "Do you think she's overreacting?" one employee murmured. The other merely shrugged, avoiding eye contact with both Margaret and Terran. Terran remained still, his gaze unwavering. When Margaret hung up, she turned back to him, chin lifted, triumph flashing in her eyes. "The authorities will be here shortly," she announced. "I suggest you wait outside." Terran tilted his head. "Why would I wait outside? I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice rose slightly, enough to draw more attention. "You're trespassing. You've been asked to leave, and you're refusing. That's enough." At that moment, the showroom doors swung open. An elderly couple entered, their cheerful chatter fading as they sensed the thick tension in the room. Margaret forced a tight smile and gestured for a salesperson to assist them. As the couple was led away, Terran casually pulled out his phone, scrolling through it with a relaxed ease that only seemed to enrage Margaret further. "You're not taking this seriously, are you?" she hissed. He glanced up, his expression calm, yet layered with something harder to define. Amusement, perhaps, or pity. I take respect seriously, he said evenly, but you don't seem to. So here we are. Margaret opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the showroom doors opened once more. 2 uniformed police officers strode inside. She straightened, smoothing her blazer, a wave of relief and self-righteousness washing over her. "This is the man," she declared, pointing directly at Terran. Terran's voice carried through the now silent showroom, each word weighted with undeniable authority. "I'm someone who believes in treating people with dignity and respect. That includes employees, customers, everyone who walks through these doors." His gaze swept across the room, pausing on each face. Some of the employees looked away, others nodded subtly, as if recognizing the shift that was about to take place. Margaret stood frozen, her arms rigid at her sides. The confidence she had worn so boldly just moments before had drained from her features, replaced by uncertainty. Terran exhaled slowly, his patience measured, but firm. "Margaret, your behavior today wasn't just unprofessional. It was unacceptable. The way you treated me speaks volumes about how you must treat others who come in here. And that is not the culture I will tolerate at South Point Motors." She swallowed hard. I didn't know. No one told me. "And yet, even without knowing who I was, you chose to assume the worst," Terran responded evenly. "You chose to dismiss me, to police my presence in a place where I had every right to be. And now that you do know, you suddenly regret it? Or is it that you're only regretting getting caught?" Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if grasping for something to hold on to. The weight of the moment settled in, pressing against her like an immovable force. Terran let the silence stretch before continuing. "This dealership is about to change. That change starts today, and it starts with a counter." A nervous murmur spread through the employees. Some stole glances at one another, wondering what this meant for them. Others stood with a newfound sense of anticipation, as if realizing that the status quo they had silently endured might finally be shifting. Margaret forced a stiff nod. "I understand. I'll do better." Terran studied her for a long moment, assessing the sincerity, or lack thereof, behind her words. "We'll see, because this isn't just about you. It's about the culture you've fostered here. I expect professionalism, fairness, and respect. Anything less?" He let the unspoken consequence hang in the air, unmistakable in its implication. Margaret nodded again, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Understood." Terran turned back to the rest of the staff. "If anyone has concerns, if anyone has been treated unfairly, my door is open. Things are going to be different moving forward. If you're part of the problem, now is the time to change. And if you're here to build something better, you'll have my full support." A beat of silence. Then a few employees nodded. A couple even murmured their agreement. The tension in the room didn't disappear entirely, but it shifted. Something new settling in its place, something resembling hope. Terran turned back toward the front doors. He had come in as an observer. Now he was leaving as a leader who had set the first pieces of change into motion. As he stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, he allowed himself the smallest of smiles. This was just the beginning. Margaret had built her reputation on efficiency and results, and she wasn't known for mincing words. Terran turned to face her, offering a polite smile. "Just browsing, thank you." Margaret's eyes scanned him from head to toe, lingering a moment too long. Something in her gaze wasn't quite right. An evaluation. A judgment. She didn't smile back. Browsing, she repeated, her voice flat. Well, if you're looking for financing options, our team can guide you. But unless you're serious about buying today, we prefer to focus on active customers. The words hung in the air, cold and dismissive. Terran's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Still, he remained calm. I appreciate the information. I'd like to look around a bit more, if that's okay. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Just don't touch anything without asking first, she said curtly before turning on her heel and walking away. As Terran moved through the showroom, examining vehicles and jotting down a few notes on his phone, the atmosphere remained tense. Employees whispered to each other, casting glances in his direction. It wasn't long before Margaret reappeared, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. This time, her arms were crossed, and her expression was one of thinly veiled irritation. I noticed you've been wandering around for a while, she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. If you're not planning to buy, I'll have to ask you to leave. We don't have time for distractions. Terran looked up from the specs of an SUV he'd been reviewing. His calm demeanor remained intact, but his voice carried a quiet authority. I'm not distracting anyone. I have every right to be here. Margaret scoffed. Look, I've seen this before. People coming in, wasting time, pretending they're interested. We're running a business here. If you're not buying, you need to go. Terran's gaze didn't waver. I think you're making some assumptions about me, he said evenly. Margaret's eyes narrowed, her irritation now bordering on hostility. And I think I know my job, she snapped. Either show me you're serious, or I'll handle this my way. The tension in the room was thick, drawing the attention of nearby employees. They watched silently, unsure of what to do. The stage was set for a confrontation, but Terran remained composed. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply met Margaret's sharp gaze with an unshakable calm that only deepened her frustration. And that was just the beginning. Margaret stood there, arms crossed, her gaze unrelenting. The faint hum of conversations in the showroom seemed to quiet, the air thick with tension. Terran tilted his head slightly, letting out a small sigh before responding. Handle it your way, he asked, his voice calm but firm. What exactly does that mean? Margaret straightened her blazer and gave a dismissive shake of her head. It means I have to ensure my team and our customers feel comfortable, and right now, you're making people uncomfortable by wandering around without a clear purpose. Terran raised an eyebrow. Uncomfortable? Because I'm looking at cars in a car dealership. The subtle challenge in his tone made her bristle. She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a sharp whisper. Look, I don't know what your deal is, but we've had enough people come in here wasting time, asking for test drives, then vanishing when it's time to